And it's live right now. Welcome, everybody, to another Friday night interview. And this is interview number 37. With me, I have John. How's it going?
It's going good. Thank you so much for agreeing to have me. It's a bit of an honor for me to be able to share my story with other people who might be going through the same thing. So thank you for allowing me this space and this time.
Now, I appreciate you for hopping on and telling your story. You said that, well, your primary issue is halitosis, and you said you had this for 30 years, correct?
Just a give or take. I mean, I would say more precisely, probably 27 years, 28 years,
Mm.
somewhere in that range. It started for me when I was about, well, I don't know. Let me not say when it started. I don't know when it started. When I remember kids saying things to me, though, it was around probably 12 years old. So maybe it started before that and I just didn't know. But around 12 years old is when I can remember the comments and the jokes and the ridicule becoming more persistent. So I always say it started around 12.
Okay, so could you remember your first memory? I know since it's 27 years, you said that's a fairly long time. Um, so can you remember, be more specific about the memory, or is it too long to even recollect?
No, no, man. No, not at all. Because I feel like I remember every single embarrassing thing that has happened to me, and probably realistically, not every single one, but most of them. And so, yeah, I can remember, if not my first experience, I can remember one of the first experiences and probably one of the ones to this day that is the most embarrassing, or one of the very most embarrassing. I was in the car with my aunt in the passenger seat in the front, and I had all my cousins in the back seat. It was probably altogether nine of us crammed in her little Hyundai, and we were going to McDonald's to get breakfast. And there was a song playing on the radio, and I was singing along to the song. And she just started at one point laughing hysterically, and everybody was like, "What's so funny? What's so funny?" And she turns right to me in the passenger seat, and she looks right at me and says, "You're never going to get a girlfriend if your breath keeps smelling like that." And I just remember everybody in the car erupting in laughter. All my cousins in the back seat, everybody, they were all laughing at me. And that was really one of the first memories that I have where I felt like completely humiliated.
Mm. So you had this around 12 years old, and your at least your aunt was the first person to tell you like you had a foul breath.
Yep.
From middle school to high school, I guess you tried almost every, or the general things that you would do to try to have fresh breath. You probably did mouthwash, brush your teeth, more than the average person.
Well, interestingly, no, not at first. At first, I didn't think anything of it. I don't think at that age you can fully comprehend or realize the kind of thing that this is. I just don't think it's possible. So at first, I didn't think anything of it. I just continued to live my life and do me. I
Mm.
think it was maybe around ninth grade. So now at this point, I'm probably, living with it for about 2 years at this point. And I remember just how persistent it was becoming. I was hearing it all the time, not just from the kids at school, but from family. I mean, pretty much everyone I encountered. So I would say really it was our sophomore year of high school where I really realized like I have a real problem. And
Mm.
that's when I really started to hit it with Listerine, and I was brushing 3 times a day. I started carrying the little travel size Colgate and Listerine bottles in my book bag, and I would sneak away to go to the bathroom to brush my teeth and stuff like that. Because at that time, there just wasn't a lot of information. There really still isn't, to be quite honest with you, that much information about it. But at that time I really didn't know anything about it. So I was just thinking I need to brush my teeth more, I need to do a better job, I need to floss and things like that. And so that's what I was doing. But it wasn't doing anything. I was still getting the kids, talking about me, family members, things like that. Um, but high school wasn't really, despite all of that, high school really wasn't hard for me. My story is very similar to Mark McNeely, where I had a pretty good high school career. I was somewhat popular. I had girls who liked me. They thought I was good looking. I played basketball. I made straight A's. I mean, scored ridiculous on the SATs. Like I had a really good high school life. So it didn't affect me emotionally. I think high school, I was just trying to battle the physical symptoms of it. College is when it really got hard, and that's when it became more of an emotional trauma than just a physical thing for me.
I'll go more into that because since you were saying about with high school, even though you might have saw reactions or maybe heard comments and stuff, you're still fairly popular. You still had friends, girlfriends. I don't know how good you were at basketball, but still you would still have like a social life at the end of the day. So I guess toward the once you started getting into college, it got so bad that it was almost impossible to have a social life.
Yes. And like I said, in high school it was good, and I was pretty good at basketball, by the way. It was pretty awesome. So yeah, because of that, people still liked me, they still respected me. I still had friends, still had a social life. College, freshman year, I tried to go out and sort of just reinvent myself, and I was at one of the more big time universities in the country, University of Florida. I was
Let me ask you
I
this:
was just
Were you the college that you went to? Was it close to your hometown, or was it farther away?
No, it was about 5 hour drive away. I wanted to leave home. I didn't want to go to a school close to home.
Yeah, so you wanted to have like a fresh start and just be around, not be around that, because for me, when I wanted to go to college, I definitely wanted to move from my hometown. It's like a fresh new start. I didn't have to like deal with any of these people that probably knew me from back in the day. I don't know if that was like the same case with you and that motivated you to go to that specific school.
Actually, no, no. Actually, for me, it had nothing to do with halitosis. For me, I just wanted to get away from home. I wanted to
Mm.
grow up. I wanted to be an adult. Like I wanted to be a man. And I just wanted to get away from the nest. Like I wanted to figure things out on my own and just tackle the world. I was always, and I guess we're going to get into the part of the story where it changed me. But before it changed me the way that it did, I was always a go-getter. I was always somebody who marched to the beat of my own drum. Like I was always motivated, ambitious. If I saw something I wanted, I went after it. I didn't let anything stop me. I didn't let anything people, had to say get in my head. Like I knew what I wanted and I went for it. I knew I always wanted to be a Florida Gator. That was that was the second school on my list. The first school on my list was actually Duke in North Carolina. Um, but I never applied to Duke. So Florida sort of became the next best school for me. And I knew I wanted to be a Gator. So that's why I left. It really had nothing to do with the halitosis.
Okay. Yeah, because Duke is at least I don't really know too much about Duke, but I think it's a good basketball school. Like that's the school that's pretty much
Oh, yeah.
dominant. Yeah. So was that like the motivation too? Like, were you trying to get a scholarship or something like that through sports?
Well, I wasn't. I didn't think I was good enough to play for their school. I
Mm,
wanted to go to their school because of their basketball program. I wanted to be close to it, but I didn't know if I would be good enough to play. I actually went to school on a full academic scholarship,
okay.
not an athletic scholarship. Yeah. And Duke ended up being so much more expensive because I would have been an out of state,
Yeah.
an out of state student. It's always more expensive that way. So I chose to stay in state, and I just went to the University of Florida. But when I got there, I really wasn't thinking about halitosis. When I got there, I was just thinking about my life and getting into my coursework. Like I couldn't wait to declare my major and just jump right in and do what I had to do. But I realized really early on in the process that it was going to be really difficult for me to do that because it was almost from the very beginning that I started to get. The thing about the University of Florida is it's a predominantly white school, but the black population is a lot smaller. So you kind of everyone kind of gets to know everyone. So it was like after a while, that began to sort of be my reputation. People
Mhm.
sort of knew me for this problem. And when that happened, it just caused me to withdraw. Um, and that was the
I did
first
want
time in
to,
my life that I started to, that I really did start to withdraw from people. That I kind of developed all the little sort of quirky things that I do. Like, I try never to stand too close to a person. It's hard for me to look at a person in their eyes when I talk to them. I always kind of want to turn my face away. I do things like try never to sit in a seat that's directly next to someone else. I try not to get stuck in confined spaces like cars and elevators and things like
Mhm.
that. I just started to try to avoid people more and just always made sure that I had gum or mints in my mouth, and stuff like that. But the crazy thing about it is, and I don't want to come across to anyone as seeming arrogant or anything like that, but the crazy thing about it is girls think I'm so good looking. So it's like I'm always getting approached by women, by girls. And it just became so hard for me because it's like you want the attention, but at the same time, you don't want the attention. You want to be invited to parties and things that you do in college, that everyone does in college, but at the same time, you don't, because you go and you always run the risk of being humiliated. And that's what was happening to me. It was like, maybe not every time, but it was a lot of times when I try to go out and still be social, and I'd have an experience that just made me want to run and hide. And so I just started to decline, invitations, and I started to decline girls. If a girl seemed interested in me, I shied away from it, things like that. I still kept up with my classes because I wanted to graduate, but even going to class sometimes was really hard for me. Um, and night after night, man, pretty much, from the middle part of my freshman year of college, all I did every night was research halitosis. Any article that I could find on the internet, any doctor, whatever, like any product, I went for it. Night after night, just reading whatever I could to try to figure out what it was and how to beat it.
yeah, what you said is sort of reminds me of exactly how I felt when I was actually, whether I was in high school or whether I was in college. Like every time I had really bad days, I would try to look up any type of remedy that was online about, well, for me, body odor. And yeah, I would see a lot of wild, different things that people would say helped. That would be natural remedies, and yeah, they usually would never help that much. But I did want to ask you, when you were talking about being at University of Florida, what did you major in?
Finance.
Oh, okay. And were you able to successfully graduate, or did you?
Uh, it was really difficult, but yes, yes, yes.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, because I know for me, I wasn't able to deal with it too much to the point that I actually quit, just dropped out of school and had to do like online college. But you at least you were able to finally to actually pass. And hearing your story about women still being interested in you, have you ever considered? Well, I guess you didn't consider at the time, but do you feel that's the same way now? I don't know if you're like the work you're doing, there's a lot of women within your workplace, but do you still feel that there's still, I don't know, when you go to public places, there might be women looking at you or whatever, and they might take interest, etc. And the reason why I'm asking that is, have you ever considered the possibility to link up with this woman and maybe she could just be upfront and honest about your odor, so she has, I guess she will be able to tell you, since you can't detect your odor, whether or not your breath is horrendous or not.
The answer to the first part of your question about are women still interested, it's yes, they are. And I don't think it's just, again, not trying to sound any kind of way. Please don't take it that way. But I don't think it's just my looks. I think it's also sort of um when my true personality shows, because there are times when it still comes out. Maybe when I'm not as anxious about my breath and it's not at the forefront of my mind. my real personality tends to come out, and it's something people like. I always say when I talk about this that to me, I think the hardest part about dealing with this disease is the fact that when people meet me at first, and the way I guess I present myself in the way that I am, they really take a liking to me. But then when they detect it, their attitude changes. So like that person who a week ago wanted to talk to you or wanted to have conversation, or maybe that girl who a week ago was answering every text message and every phone call, um, now it becomes sparse, or they disappear, they ghost you. And
Mm,
that's always, to me, that's always been harder than the immediate rejection. Like if you reject me right off the back, yeah, that hurts, but then I just move on because I never knew you. It's the
okay.
situations where you kind of form a relationship with somebody and then they change, and you know why they changed. It wasn't because of anything you did or anything you said. It was just because of this. So I guess that's an indirect answer to the second part of your question. Yes, I have at times tried to link up with certain women because some of them were just too good to pass up. Really nice women, women of God. I'm a man of God. I still believe in the Lord. Smart women, beautiful women, good family background. So yeah, I've gone for it a few times because I'm like, I can't be single forever, or at least that's what I used to think. Um, and they, I've never had one come right out and say to me, I'm leaving you because you have bad breath, or I can't do this because you have bad breath. But it's other little things that they say that kind of confirm the problem. And so, eventually when they stop calling and they stop texting, you kind of know what that's about. And I just, it's like just another one bites the dust kind of thing. But after a while, for me, I just decided I wasn't going to try to date anymore because each of those rejections got harder and harder to get over. Um, it really gets more and more difficult. At least that's been my experience, where it's just more and more difficult each time to dust myself off and get back up. And I just said, well, the best way that I know to avoid having to do all of that and go through all of that is just not to date at all anymore, and just choose to be single.
Hmm. So I wanted to ask you, when it really got hard during your college years, what were you what were you trying to do? Because at what point then you start trying to seek out doctors? Was it during the high school? Because I feel like with high school, it was bad, but it wasn't that bad, and college was at its worst.
No, it was I think it the first dentist that I went to specifically to talk to them about this was probably coming up towards the end of my freshman year. It might have been the beginning of my sophomore year of college. Um, I was using my, the reimbursement money that I was getting after my classes were paid. I was using that money to go to the dentist, but I was going to general practitioners. And I was always hearing the same thing. Your teeth are perfect, your gums are healthy, everything is good. We're just going to do a mouth cleaning, and then you just, as long as you brush and floss and use mouthwash, you're good. And again, in those earlier stages, when you just don't know a lot about this, you just take their word for it. So I'm like, well, if that's what the dentist is telling me to do, then that's what I'm going to do. But it wasn't until later in my research that I learned that Listerine, Colgate, Crest, all these over-the-counter harsh mouthwashes that have all kinds of ingredients, all they do is just dry out your mouth and make the problem worse. Um, I wish I knew earlier in the process, but that's when I came across, and I know you've heard of this already many, many times, but that's when I came across TheraBreath. I think that's everybody's first thing that they try. I really do believe that. So I came across TheraBreath, and I thought I had found my miracle cure. When I was reading the website and everything like that, it was more information in one place than I had ever seen before about this thing. And the Dr. Katz, claims to be the foremost expert on all things bad breath. So I was praising the Lord. I was like, I found my answer. And when I first started to use the products, they made my mouth feel cleaner than I think my mouth had ever felt before. It really did make my mouth feel super hydrated and clean. I didn't have that dry, metallic, nasty taste that I always had before. And I thought I was cured. But I found out sort of, after a couple weeks in, that I was still getting the reactions. I was still getting the comments and things like that. But silly me, I continued to just throw money at this product thinking that, well, maybe, I've had it for, at this point, maybe 16 years. I can't expect for 2 weeks of using a product to cure something that I've had for so long. So let me just keep using it. And I used it for like another year or so, before I realized, like, man, this really just isn't working. And even that clean feeling that it gave me in the beginning, it stopped. That wasn't even happening anymore. It went back to that same nasty, metallic, dry environment kind of feeling. And that's when I said, okay, I got to take it to the next level. And I started looking for specialists. I started looking for people who specialize just in halitosis. And you don't find very many of those, but I found a clinic out in California. I'm hesitant to say the name of the clinic because I don't know. I don't want any situations with lawsuits or anything like that. Long story short, though, it was a scam. And a lot of those breath clinics are a joke. They're a scam. And I would encourage people, really don't spend your money on that stuff. I really think those people just prey on people like us who are desperate for a cure. But I went out to see the dude, and it was a 2-day. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, why do you feel that it was a scam? Do you feel like that?
Well, this is why I say it was a scam. Okay. Before I chose to go out and see him, I chose to go out and see him in 2010. I came across his website, however, in early 2009. And on his website, he has Deoxybright and Deoxyrinse. What those are, and McNeely talked about them because I think he tried them too. But it's a two-part, the mouthwash is a two-part solution that you mix it and you let it sit for a while and it fizzes up and it smells like chlorine, like what you would clean your pool with. And then the toothpaste is also a two-part thing. You squirt one part, you squirt it on your toothbrush and then you use it. So I started to order that from his website. There was also a mouth irrigator that he sells on his website too. So I ended up ordering that too as well. It's called HydroFloss. And so I was using these products for about a year. And to no avail. I still had the problem. So that's when I called him. It was July of 2010. And I made an appointment to go see him. And I took all the money that I had at the time in the world to fly out to California to go see this guy. And I got there and there were already immediate red flags to me. Like when I got there, he doesn't have his own office, right? He basically rents a chair from an actual dental practice, but it's not his. He just rents a chair. And it was this little small room. And so to me, that was kind of like, and he was his own secretary. So to me, that I had never seen that before. So I'm like, this is kind of odd to me, you know? So I get there and he wanted to talk more to me about my experience at university than he wanted to talk about my mouth. And I wanted to talk about my mouth. There were no x-rays done. There was nothing like I was used to when I would go to the dental office, you know? He looked into my mouth. He told me my gums and teeth look good. He made me blow in his face. Then he hooked me up to the halometer. He gave a reading, I think, of 117. And he told me 117 means you have a problem, but it's not that bad. And we're going to treat you. But his treatment literally was the same products that I had been buying from his website for about a year and a half. He sent me home with a brand new bottle of the mouthwash and the toothpaste. And he says, I want you to do this 5 times tonight, every hour on the hour. And then I want you to come back and see me tomorrow morning. So I felt like that was kind of odd. I'm like, well, I've been using your products and they haven't been working for me. But I thought, whatever, I'm just going to follow his instructions. So that's what I did. And then the next morning you go in for the follow-up. And all he does is he has you blow in his face, and then he hooks you up to the halometer. When he hooked me up to the halometer, it read 13. So it went from 117 to 13, and he told me I was cured. And I said, Doc, are you sure? And he's like, yeah, you're cured. And I said, well, how will I know? How? Because you have to understand at this point, for me, he's the first person that I opened up to about my problem. Even when I was going to the general practitioners, I wasn't going in depth with them. I was just saying, hey, I think I might have a problem with malodor. But he was the first one who I actually sat with and told him my experiences and told him how long the journey had been and everything that I had tried. So when he was telling me I was cured, I trusted him. I believed him. In a weird way,
How old were you at
he
that
was
time?
more than... Go ahead.
How old were you at that time?
At this time, I think I was 20. I want to say I was 26, maybe 26, 27, somewhere around there. And in a weird way, he was more than just a doctor to me. It was almost like I felt like he was my friend, because I had so many phone conversations with him before I flew out to California. So when he was telling me I was cured, I believed him. But I'm telling you, man, as soon as I got to the airport, the first 3 or 4 people that I tried to talk to, because I wasn't doing the normal things like trying to stand a few feet back or anything, like, I was right up in people's faces because I needed to test it. Like, I needed to see. So I
The
was like
confirmation.
right up in people's faces, trying to talk to them confidently for the first time in so many years. And I was getting the same reactions as people backing away, clearing their throats, sniffling, fiddling with their noses and stuff like that. But I didn't let that deter me. It wasn't until I got back to Florida and I started, I think I let about a week and a half go by, and I was noticing all the same stuff. And I emailed him, the doctor. And man, the email that I got in response was the nastiest. Like, it was the nastiest email, complete with the F word twice. I remember. And I was shocked because I'm like, this is a medical professional. Like, this is an email from a so-called medical professional. I told you not to worry about what people were saying about you. How could you effing this? And like, just blasting me in this email. And I actually started crying, not because I'm some soft little punk, but because, again, like, at this time, I'm looking at this person as the only person in the world I trust. I hadn't talked to my mom. I hadn't talked to anyone else. He was the only one. And it was just like, when the only person you've ever talked to about how tough this thing has been is now the one who is like reacting this way to you. Like, I felt like I had nobody in the world who would ever understand me. And I think, I'm not going to say that email was, but that time period was the first time that I felt that it began to change me emotionally, where it wasn't just a physical thing for me anymore. Now I started to experience depression. I started to experience frustration and anger. Now is the time period where I started to even question God. Like, okay, God, I've been praying about this for so many years now. Like, what's going on? Like, why do I have to have this? Why can't I find a cure? And I did have a girlfriend at the time who didn't know that's why I flew out to California. I just told her I needed to get away for a while, for a few days. She was actually really upset with me because she was like, I don't understand why you need to fly across the country to get away. But I remember her at that time also repeatedly asking me, like, do you still find me attractive? Do you still love me? Because I didn't realize, like, my whole personality was changing. I wasn't as affectionate with her. I wasn't as friendly with the other people around me, even my bosses at work, and they would all tell me, like, you're different than how we met you. So that's when I think that this change began to happen. I became a moody person, an irritable person, because I was just frustrated with life at that point. And then a couple years later is when, the suicidal thoughts and all of that stuff started to happen. It just became really, really difficult for me to cope with having this.
Can I ask you, so when you were talking about the experience you had with the medical professional that happened, that was in California, it was interesting that you were talking to me that this is the first time you opened up to someone about your halitosis. And further within the explanation or in the story, you said you had a girlfriend at the time. So you didn't even try to talk to your girlfriend about it or even your mother. I know for me, first person I'm going to talk to, or within my experience, I just talked to my mother. I said, hey, do I smell bad? Because, I started getting those types of reactions at high school. But you didn't even talk to your mother about this. Neither did you even open up to your girlfriend about this at all. It was just that medical
No, I
professional.
didn't. It was only him at that time. I eventually did open up to my mom. So not counting him, I would say she was the first person. I mean, obviously he was the first person, but as far as people close to me, my mom was the first person I opened up to. I opened up to her 2 years later. So if this happened at 27, I opened up to my mom at 29.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't handle it anymore. But the interesting thing about the story with my mom is my mom, I around 22, I remember my mom calling me and saying, like, I feel like something is wrong with you. Like, I feel like there's something in your life that you're not telling me about. I can hear it in your voice. And I guess moms just know. And I would always tell her, Mom, there's something I do need to tell you. There is something I want to talk to you about, but not right now. Like, I'll know when it's time. And it took me about 7 years before I could finally open up to her. My girlfriend, the girl who I was referring to, interestingly enough, this is a true story. She could not smell certain smells because she had something was wrong with her nasal cavity. She was actually always going to the ear, nose, and throat doctor, and they were talking about doing all kinds of surgeries and stuff. She could only smell really, really sweet smells. So anything that smelled really, really bad, I guess thankfully for me, she could not smell that. So she never perceived that I had bad breath. And
Mm-hmm.
so I never really felt any urgency to open up to her. It never affected our relationship. But we ended up, that relationship did end up dissolving because she moved away or whatever. But so at 29 is when I finally, opened up to my mom, and she was the first person I attempted to open up to. And I remember her reaction was, "Oh, that's it? Like, that's what you've been hiding all these years? Oh, that's nothing." Like, she even told me, she's like, "I thought you were getting ready to tell me like you got HIV or something crazy like that." And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
"Nah, no." But I felt sort of discouraged in a way because her reaction was so nonchalant, but she didn't know what I had been through all these
Right.
years. She didn't know the nasty things people said to me in high school and in junior high. Like, she didn't know about the times that I was laughed out of the classroom because I never shared that with her. Like, if I would get, one time I got laughed at so bad, even the teacher was laughing at me. And I remember, like, I would just come home, and yeah, I would be sad, I would be hurt. And she'd be like, "What happened? Did something happen in school?" And I would always lie about it. I'd be like, "Nah, I'm good. Nothing happened. I'm all right." So she didn't know that I had already, 18, 19 years probably at this point of just all the ridicule and the things people say to you, and how they react to you. So her attitude was like, "Oh, this is easy." And I kept trying to
Right.
tell her, actually, no, Mom, it's not, because I've already been fighting this. Like, you don't know what I've done already and how hard it's been for me. So she jumped in and she said, "Okay, whatever you want to do." And I was still living away at this time. So I had this conversation with her over the phone. So it's not like
Mm.
at that point she
Oh,
could
okay.
smell me,
That's different. Mm-hmm.
I wasn't living with her at the time. So I told my mom at 29. I told my dad at 31. It took another 2 years before I could tell my dad. So in that time, my mom was just, she would send me, like, my mom is from the islands, and so they always have all kinds of little herbal remedies and things that they do. They can go outside and pull leaves off a tree and make certain teas and stuff. So she would make me that stuff and then send it to me, or I'd drive down to South Florida where she was living and I would get it. But then she'd always tell me, like, "I don't smell anything. I don't smell anything." Well, and I'd always be like, "Well, Mom, when I go up to school, when I go back to Gainesville, my experience is completely different." And so, she'd make me these teas and I would drink them and things like that, and they wouldn't do anything. Um, I told my dad, and my dad said, "Okay."
Well,
And
well,
he had a very similar reaction to my mom. He actually told me he thought I was about to tell him I was gay. And I was like, no. Like, why do
Let
you
me
all think it's this extreme thing, you know? But go ahead. I'm
let
sorry.
me
Go ahead.
ask you let me ask you about your mother's nationality. She says she's from the Caribbean islands. What island specifically?
She's from Haiti.
Oh, she's Haitian. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad is from
Okay.
another Caribbean island, but my mom is Haitian.
Okay. Because I don't know. It's maybe it's not a big deal, but I have interviewed a number of people, and they have parents. They were either from the Caribbean islands, and many of them were Jamaican. Matter of fact, I talked to this one. I have a friend who has an odor condition too, and she actually was in the University of Florida as well. I don't know when she enrolled, but I know she quit at a certain time because she couldn't deal with the rejection. But another thing I wanted to say was when you're talking about the interactions you have with your mother and your father, and she said, "Oh, I thought you had something serious like AIDS or gay." I remember when I was maybe in the early 20s or something. My mother saw me as depressed or whatever, and she tried to give me a therapist. So I went to a therapist, and it was very hard to open up to somebody about smelling bad. So I was very quiet and stuff. But when I eventually revealed the fact that I was depressed and stuff because I was, people would make fun of me for smelling bad. He was very dismissive and angry about the fact that my issue was about odor, and he would bring up the fact that he had clients with people who were dealing with HIV, and your biggest issue is that you smell bad, and he just like left the room all mad and shit. And it was so like I don't know, that shit really pissed me off. But I don't know, when you were speaking about it, it just reminded me of those instances. But going back to you,
And let me tell you, and sorry to cut you off, but let me tell you, man, that is one of the more frustrating things about it too, is when you tell people about the situation and then they start telling you about other people who are going through worse things, or they start to tell you, my mom would always say things like, "Oh, when I wake up, my breath smells bad too." And I'm like, Mom, these things are not the same. Like we're not talking about the same thing. I had a friend who I opened up to, and he's like, "Well, I'm fat, and people look at me funny and treat me differently because I'm fat." And I'm like, these things are not the same. They're just not the same thing. They're not on the same level. So no, I completely understand what you're saying when you say that, because I've had people who have reacted to me the same way. Yeah, for sure.
so so at this moment, okay. Well, we went through the fact that you went to college, you left. It was hard, but you were still able to pass. After college, I guess you got some job around Gainesville, or you moved to
It
another
was in
city.
Gainesville.
It was in
No, it was
Gaines.
in Gainesville. Hmm.
Was in
I
Gainesville.
stayed in Gainesville. I stayed in Gainesville for a very long time after I was done with school. Because I found a really high paying job. The cost of living was very low. Um, I was I just wasn't ready. Like, I didn't know where I wanted to go. I didn't know if I wanted to move back up north, because that's where we originally from, up north. I didn't know if I wanted to move back to South Florida. Like, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I guess I just got comfortable working the job. But let me tell you, those were absolutely my worst years. Um,
Mhm.
Working where I was working, I was being ridiculed every single day. I'd go home just completely crushed every day. It got so bad to the point where I started to call out a lot, and I actually had to get called in the HR office, and they were getting ready to fire me just from missing too many days. And so I felt backed into a corner. So I had to reveal to her and let her know, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. This is why I missed so many days. And just like everybody else, man, she sat right across from me and said, I don't smell anything. You're good. I would tell you if you had a problem. But meanwhile, in my department, in the lunchroom, people are talking. I can hear it. I can hear the things people are saying about me. Or you get the people who they see you coming, and then all of a sudden they pull out their phones and pretend to be on a phone call, or they just turn around and go the other way. These were the things that were happening every day. So I was sinking deeper and deeper into depression. I got to a point where I didn't leave my house unless I absolutely had to leave my house. I just separated from everybody. I even stopped going to church. And these were the years where I did lose my faith. I went through about a 4.5 year period where I wasn't praying anymore. I wasn't going to church. I wasn't reading the Bible. I had given up on God. I just said, I'm done. Either you're not real or you're real, but you just don't care about me.
Mm,
And so I completely gave up on my faith at that point. This was also around the time period that I just started to smoke weed nonstop. I needed it to get through the day. And I'm not afraid to say, like, I got a lot of bad habits around that time. I developed a strong addiction to pornography. Um, I was just really self-destructive. Like I would just, like, if a girl showed interest, I didn't pursue relationship, but if I thought I could have sex with her, I did. Um and surprisingly, some girls did it with me. Like, it's just, I didn't care about my life. I didn't care if I lived or died. I didn't care about anything because it just felt like my best years were being wasted.
mm,
Um so I just said, I'm gonna do all the things I never did before. Because I was that kid in high school who never skipped school. I was a virgin till I got to college. Like, I was trying to live a godly life, you know? But at this point, I'm like, well, if all of it was for nothing, then I'm just gonna do all the stuff that I always kind of wanted to try that I just never did. Because what's the point of, what am I holding out for? Like, I might never be married. I might never find a woman who wants to marry me and have children with me. So I just started being really self-destructive. Um,
mm.
my mom really, at this point, encouraged me to start going to counseling, which I did, but it didn't help me. Because it was like, I don't want to sit and talk to anyone. I want a cure for this disease. You know what I'm saying? Um, and so my dad convinced me at this point, and at this point, I think I'm about 33 years old, 33, 34. My dad convinced me, like, let's fight. Let's give it one more, let's just go for it. Whatever happens, happens. And so I went and got all my wisdom teeth pulled all at once. Um, I flew to Georgia to see a specialist. The breath place in Georgia was so night and day from the place in California, mind you. Um, that place was an actual real practice, and they actually really did things. Like, they did full X-rays and panoramic pictures, and they tested my saliva. And when I got my results back from the saliva test, it's a chart, and it's broken up into 3 levels. There's the really bottom level, where that's where the majority of the population is. As long as they brush and floss and do all that, they're fine. Then there's the middle level, and the middle level is broken up into 2 levels in itself. There's the lower middle level, where it's like, okay, you might have a slight problem, but it shouldn't be something that's life altering. Just brush your teeth and be careful. Then there's the upper middle level, where it's like, okay, now we're approaching sort of a danger zone. Like, you have a lot more bad bacteria than a normal person should, or usually does. And then there's the upper level. That's when you're like, you can fill up a room. I was
Mm.
on the upper middle level, approaching that 3rd level, but I had not crossed over into that 3rd level. So the doctor said, your case, compared to a lot of the other cases we've had, is actually mild. She's like, I'm sitting across from you right now with no mask on, and I don't smell, you're not like blowing me away. Like, she said, we've had patients who have come in here, and the moment they start talking, they fill up the whole lobby. So she said, at least take confidence in that you are not as bad as those people. And if we've successfully treated those people, then we should be able to treat you. And that gave me such confidence at the time, I remember. Um, and she
Can I
said,
ask you?
we're going to go through a 2-week treatment. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Can I ask you? At that time, were you doing anything to improve your breath, or maybe that's the reason why it wasn't as
At
bad?
that time, at that time, I cannot say that I remember doing anything extraordinary. At that time, the only thing that I was doing, I was I had actually gone back to using the commercial products, the Colgates and the Listerines and stuff, because I got tired of spending money on TheraBreath and Deoxyrinse and Smart Mouth and some of the more expensive stuff. Because I figured, if they're not working anyway, let me buy the cheaper stuff, because I can save money if I'm going to have bad breath either way. So no, not really. I wasn't really doing anything extraordinary. And in fact, the first day of the consultation, they even tell you don't brush your teeth. So I hadn't even brushed my teeth that day because they want to be able to get as accurate a reading as they can when they do the saliva test. So when the results from that saliva test were coming from a day when I didn't brush my teeth at all because I was told not to. So that's another thing that made me feel kind of, in a weird way, kind of good, because I'm like, if I didn't even brush my teeth and you're telling me that I'm not at the worst level, then but you know, here's the thing. You're
Well,
hearing that medically and you're comparing it to all of your experiences in the past and it wasn't matching up. I'm like, well, if I'm not that bad, how could I have gone through some of the stuff that I've gone through? You know, some of the
one
things
more
people
question
would
I do
say to
have.
me. You know?
One more
Yeah.
question I do have. I see somebody in the chat really wants to know what's the name of the place you're talking about in Georgia where they examined your breath and gave you the different levels I
Um,
guess.
I don't. I honestly don't remember the name of the place, but I do remember where it was. It was in a small city called Lawrenceville, Georgia. It was approaching the border of Georgia and Tennessee.
Mm.
So I remember it's in Lawrenceville. So to that person, I'm so sorry that I can't remember the name of the place. But if you Google, I guess, just dental practices in Lawrenceville, Georgia, I can't imagine you're going to run into too many of them. Um, I'm so sorry that I don't remember the name of the place, but I do remember that it's in Lawrenceville, Georgia. That's all I can tell you.
Okay. And also another comment was what are the foods were you eating at that time?
At that time, I was eating whatever I wanted. I like I said, this was still sort of during that self-destructive period in my life. So I didn't care anymore about trying to stick to the vegan alkaline diet and all that stuff. I was like, if my breath is gonna smell bad either way, I'm gonna go back to eating pizza and fish and steak and a lot of the stuff that I had cut out of my diet to try to see if it would make a difference. And like I said, I was smoking weed all the time. And if you know anything about this, you know, tobacco products and stuff like that make the problem worse too. So really at this time, I wasn't doing anything that you would think of like to try to fight or solve the disease per se. I was just living my life because it was really my parents who were egging me on and trying to motivate me to keep fighting because I was telling them at that point, like, I give up because I just got so tired. You got to understand, you know, and anybody who's been in my position can tell you, going to doctor after doctor after doctor, ear, nose, and throat doctor, dentist, regular practitioners to do blood work, having to explain the story over and over and over and spend money and copays and talk to insurance companies and all the different things you have to do. All of that, in addition to the disease itself, gets so tiresome. You're like,
Yeah.
I'm doing all this stuff and I'm traveling all these places and I'm seeing all these different people. And I was also dealing with the frustration of every doctor telling me, I don't smell anything. I don't smell anything. I was even having doctors put their whole faces, it felt like, in my mouth trying to smell something. And everyone is telling me, I don't smell anything. But then when I go to Walmart or I go to the grocery store or I go someplace and I'm just trying to carry on a conversation or even at work and I'm hearing people, oh, his breath smells like shit and all this stuff. And I'm like, how could it be that when I talk to people I trust, they're all telling me I'm good, but then when I go out in public, I'm having these experiences. So all of these things just made me not care anymore. I was just like, I'm gonna do whatever I want. I'm gonna live however I want because I'm miserable and I'm tired of fighting this and I'm tired of spending money. So that was a really long answer to your question. At this point, I was eating whatever I wanted. I was doing whatever I wanted because I had reached a point where I felt like I had given up on trying to fight it.
What's your theory on that? On medical professionals for some reason not being able to detect your odor, and maybe family members. I know for some people, they say some people believe that most of their family members are lying. For me, I feel like it's a mixture. I do feel that some can smell me and some cannot. But for medical professionals, for some reason, all throughout, they don't wince, they don't, do anything that makes me feel like they can detect my odor compared to just the average person outside. What is your theory, if you have a possible theory about that?
Um, I think I have separate theories for medical professionals versus your family. Medical professionals, I think maybe just a lot of them don't have an answer for you. So they'd rather tell you you don't have a problem than tell you you do have a problem, because maybe they might expect for them to have the answer, and they
Right.
don't.
Mm-hmm.
Even to this day, we're in the year 2022, and even to this day in dental school, they don't spend very much time on halitosis. They study gum disease, they study, periodontal this and all this kind of stuff, but they don't study halitosis per se. So I think for medical professionals, maybe that could be a reason why a lot of them are just like, oh, you're good, because they don't want to deal with it. They don't want you to expect them to have an answer they don't have. For family members, the only thing I could come up with is, once your mom, once your dad, once you reveal to them that you've been suicidal, that you've thought about not wanting to live, I think that being faced with having to tell you you have this problem is just something they don't want to do, because they know how much mental distress, how much hurt, how much pain. And, especially a mother, when you hear your child say, there have been times, mom, that I haven't wanted to live anymore. I would imagine for a mom, especially, you can't turn around at that point and tell your son or your daughter, like, yeah, you actually do have bad breath, because you might fear that that might drive your child over the edge,
Right.
and so I think for a parent it might just be fear of what the reaction might be. Even though I always told my parents, don't worry about my reaction. Like, I would rather, if I have a problem, I would rather hear it from you than the people who I hear it from every day. In a weird way, I think I always have wanted, even now to this day, I've always wanted at least one person to say, you know what, John, your breath does stink, but it's not as bad as you think. Or it
Mm-hmm.
is as bad as you think, but we're going to fight it. Like, I just want one person to say, yes, I smell it. Yes, there is something there. But when everybody you actually have the courage to open up to tells you you don't have a problem, it's really, really frustrating. It's really disheartening and discouraging. And for many years, I shut down again.
Yeah.
I didn't start talking about it again with people until this year. Um, this well, actually, no, I'm wrong. Until, because we're still in the beginning of this year. So it was last year when I finally started to open up to people again. I actually just told my pastor, my current pastor, 2 days ago. I had the conversation with him. 3 weeks ago, I had a conversation with one of my closest cousins, who told me she has never smelled anything, but she did say to me, the person you were before you went to college and the person you are now is like two different people. And she said, I could never understand why you changed so drastically. She said, now it makes complete sense to me. Um, and then, like I said, I came across your channel and I felt encouraged to share my story with other people who might be going through this. But for many, many years, man, I completely shut down again, because I got tired of I felt people were lying to me, and people were making me feel crazy. My mom started saying things like, "Oh, maybe it's all in your head," and I'm like, "Really?" And I would give her scenarios, like I would tell her stories, and then I would ask her to try to explain it. So I'd be like, "Mom, have you ever had someone sit across from you, and the whole time you're talking to them, they've got their hand blocking their nose and their mouth?" No. Okay, then how would you explain that's happened to me repeatedly? And to see her squirm and try to come up with reasons, and she try to come up with all kinds of things other than the thing that makes the most sense. Or if I would say, Mom, I heard them talking about me at work, it's like, oh, well, maybe they were talking about another John, and I'm like, no, I'm the only John who works there. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Like, things like that. I just got tired of it, and it started to make me resent the person. And I didn't want to resent my mom. I didn't want to resent my dad. I didn't want to resent my close friends. So instead of continuing to try to ask them and talk to them about it, I completely just shut down again. And I went back to hoping that people would just fall in love with my personality, or I'd meet that girl who would just fall in love with my personality. But that never really happened. And so my old pastor from Gainesville, I've kept in touch with him all these years. When I finally opened up to him about it, he was really the first person who started to encourage me to talk about it. Like, tell your current pastor, tell that girl at church who you're crazy about. Because there is a girl at church I'm absolutely crazy over, and I feel like this has affected our relationship, you know. So he was the one who started to encourage me, you know, open up, start talking to people. Maybe if it doesn't catch them by surprise, and you tell them it's an actual medical condition and it's not a hygiene issue, that you'll have better relationships and and stuff like that. So I am now slowly starting to open up to more people. I'm gonna open up to my barber the next appointment that I have. Like, and it
Oh,
takes a
that's
lot
good,
of courage. Let me tell you, it takes a lot of courage. There were many times that I tried to open up to my current pastor before a couple of days ago, and I just would always freeze. Like when he would call me and say, "Okay, what do you want to talk about?" I I wouldn't do it. And I could sense he was starting to get really frustrated because he's like, I know you really want to talk about this thing. I don't know what it is, but you need to open up. Maybe it's something I can help you with, you know? So, um, for me to do it though, it almost has to be on impulse, because if I have any amount of time to think about it before I do it, it's enough time for me to talk myself out of doing it, if that makes sense. So if I'm going to open up to a person, it has to be on impulse. Like I have to do it right then and there and just start talking and not leave myself any wiggle room to get out of it. And that's what I did with him a couple days ago. I got him on the phone and I said, Pastor, I got to talk to you. I've been dealing with something for, 20 plus years of my life, almost 30. It's something that has really um, kind of destroyed who I was. And I left myself no opportunity to wiggle out of it. Like I just went for it. He let me talk for almost 2 hours. I told him pretty much my story from start to finish. And and it was a really freeing experience to have the conversation with him. Of course, he approached it from a spiritual standpoint. You know, it's the enemy, it's lies of the enemy. Don't let the enemy stop you. You still need to praise the Lord and do what He's called you to do and everything like that. And believe me, I still want to praise the Lord, and do the things He's called me to do. But it's really difficult. Like one of the things that we believe that He's calling me to do is actually to be a pastor.
Mm.
But I can't even talk to one person. So now I got to get in front of a room full of people. It's just really a daunting thing for me. But to have that conversation with him um, was a very freeing experience. Even right now, this is a very freeing experience for me, to just have an opportunity to tell my story, you know?
I definitely, because you said a lot, and there's just a lot of things I wanted to ask you, especially
Sorry
since
if
you
I'm rambling
still,
a bit.
no problem. Because you said you still go to church, so I don't know if do you go to the choir? Do you have any activities that you go to every day? Because I know when we were trying to set up this interview, you were at I know you were at church doing something. I don't know if it was because you have some type of
Yeah.
practice or.
No, what it is I'm part of different ministries in the church.
Mhm.
Actually, the girl who I'm telling you about that I'm crazy about, um, we are the excuse me, we are the two financial accountants of the church. So there's that. We're
Mm.
also the director and co-director of the kids ministry of the church. So there's that. Um, I'm part of the intercession ministry. That's the ministry that we basically stay in prayer all the time. For the church, for the world. We're sort of the frontline defense of the church in the spirit, in prayer. So there's that. And they're grooming me also to be a pastor. So I spend a lot of time with the pastor and co-pastor of the church, learning from them and watching them and being taught by them. So I'm in church every Sunday, every Monday night, every Wednesday night, some Friday nights, and every Saturday morning. So I'm there constantly. I know that there are people in church who have detected it and who have talked about me, but it hasn't been as bad as it was at work or at school or anything like that. And I guess that's to be expected because it's church, you know. But there have been times when it's been really difficult. It's been really, really hard, especially when I have to deal with the girl that I'm telling you about, because I'm really crazy about her, and sometimes being close to her is tough. In the beginning, before she detected it, we were a lot closer than we are now. I mean, we were on the phone almost every night. There were nights we'd be on the phone 5, 6, 7 hours
Wow.
talking about everything. Yeah, yeah, man. Like we were getting really, really close. Her mom met me, loved me. Her other family members loved me. Um, and actually encouraged her to date me. And that's kind of where it was going. But then the problem got in the way. And that's what usually happens. I'm used to it. You know, I'm used to things going well for a while. And then they just kind of fall apart. And that was why before her, I spent 6.5, 7 years almost where I didn't even attempt to date anybody. She was the first person that I really attempted to date because I just thought she was so amazing, an
Right.
amazing person, beautiful on the inside, gorgeous on the outside, everything I want basically. And so I went for it because I was like, man, like I gotta try, like I've got to shoot my shot, like they say. Um, but I failed, you know, and it seems now she's spending time with somebody else, which that kills me every single time I have to go to church and see that. But that's sort of my reality. It just this disease gets in the way. There really isn't, and I'm sure as someone who battles body odor, like you know, there's really no aspect of life that your condition doesn't impact. It impacts everything.
Yeah. And there's a couple of things. Well, I wanted to actually read something from the chat because there's a question they wanted to ask you. You wanted one commenter wanted to know if you ever took a SIBO breath test, and I wanted to say this too. Um, I find it very fascinating that you, even though you have this odor condition or this halitosis, you still go into church, which is pretty much like a social, a social space. But for most people, like when they have halitosis or they have whatever body odor, they usually just become isolate themselves for a lengthy period of time because they just don't want to interact with anybody. But you still decided to go to church and still be around people, and even though you said it's not as bad as work and so forth, I still find it you don't get any type of anxiety, or I guess you
Oh
still.
my gosh. No, yes, yes, yes. My anxiety is on a million every time I go to anywhere outside my home. Um, the reason why I still go to church, honestly, is well, first of all, I don't feel like I have the kind of bad breath that can clear a room. I did watch one of your interviews, and she talked about having the kind of bad breath that got her fired from her job, and she had to drive from Maryland into Pennsylvania because that's the only job that she could find and things like that. Mine is not nearly that bad. If it was, I wouldn't go anywhere. I would work from home. Like I wouldn't go anywhere. The reason why I can go places, I think, still is because I do so much before I leave my house in terms of, you know, how I treat my mouth, peroxide, baking soda. I go through this whole checklist of things. I think that it keeps it from becoming that bad. Um, it's bad enough that it impacts my life. Don't get it twisted, but it's not the kind that I think fills up a room. So
Mm,
I can still function. And not only that, but when it comes to church specifically, I mean, you know, you got to go to work to make money. But when it comes to church, if I lose my faith again, I will lose my life. I'll
mm,
just kill myself. Like the only thing that keeps me going is still believing that there is a God who loves me, that there is still a God who cares for me and wants what's best for me. I don't understand why he's allowing this and why he's allowed it for almost 30 years. I don't know. Can't answer that. Um, but there's a part of scripture, and I don't know, I don't want to get too into scripture because I don't know what your own personal beliefs are or whatnot. But there's a part in scripture about Paul asking God to remove a pain in his side 3 times, and God says, "No, my grace is sufficient." and basically saying that no matter what you're going through in life, what you have, how difficult it gets, like God is always with you. And so if I stop believing that, and if I stop going to church, if I stop praying, and there are days that I can't. I'm going to be real with you. There are days that I call and I say I can't go because I'm not feeling well. There are days that I get on my knees to pray and nothing comes out. There are days I get so discouraged and so frustrated, so angry, not with God, just with the situation, that I don't open my Bible and I don't pray and I don't do any of that. So I don't want you to think that it's all like great for me all the time. No, no, no. I have sometimes 2, 3, 4 days at a time that I don't go anywhere. I call out of work. I don't go to church. I avoid everyone. I don't answer anyone's phone calls. I get into such a depressed place, but then I have to pull myself out of that, because if I stay there, I'm gonna die. Because I have thought of suicide. I've written letters saying goodbye to people. Like, there have been times I've been absolutely convinced that I was gonna end my life because of this. And I think it's only by the grace of God that I have been able to keep going. As far as the SIBO test, no, I have not done that yet. That's actually not something I learned about until probably a little less than a month ago. Somehow in all my research that escaped me. I never knew what that was. So that is now something that is on my radar, and I am going to see if I can have that done. I did read the list of symptoms though of the bacterial overgrowth, and I don't have any of the symptoms. And I have no symptoms of hiatal hernia, heartburn, GERD, none of that. So I don't know. I don't know if my problem is originating from somewhere deeper, or if it's just my mouth. I don't know.
I do. Oh, before we went live, I did talk a little bit about Mark McNeely and how he said that he had halitosis, and the way he prevented or cured himself was through just eating vegetables for 30 days straight. You said that you've actually tried it, and you actually contacted Mark McNeely some time ago, and you said it helped to a degree, but it didn't overall eliminate your halitosis. I wanted to ask you, uh, from all the things that you have tried in the last 27 years, what was the most effective and what was the worst?
The least effective, obviously, are the over-the-counter stuff, the Listerines, the Colgates, and the Crest, and all that stuff. Because that stuff, like I said, it has harsh chemicals and alcohol that just dry out your mouth and make the problem worse. Same thing with gum and candy. I would encourage anybody, if you're going to chew gum, find something with xylitol or some sugar-free option. So that's the worst. The What's worked the best for me, um, in terms of how my mouth feels, because I don't the bad breath doesn't go away, but there are times when my mouth feels clean and it feels fresh. I can tell you that I have a tongue brush. I have a tongue scraper and a tongue brush. I have a stainless steel tongue scraper that I run over my tongue a bunch of times until that white coating is gone. And then I put a mixture of baking soda and salt, and I learned that from Mark McNeely. I make a paste out of baking soda and salt, and I vigorously brush my tongue with that until it's pink. There have been times that I've brushed my tongue so hard that it's bled, honestly. But I brush my tongue until it's pink. And then I also brush my teeth with the same salt, baking soda solution. And then I use activated charcoal toothpaste. I do also have a Hydra floss. I would encourage anyone suffering with bad breath to get that, because that can get into places where dental floss cannot reach. It's a little bit expensive. It's a little over $100. So I think it's like $110, but I think it's a worthwhile investment. Um, and I use that. I don't use that every morning, but I use it at least 3, 4 times a week, and it makes my mouth feel clean for a very long time. It hasn't changed my breath, unfortunately. I still do get the comments sometimes, but I will say that a person has to get a lot closer to me after doing all of these things. A person has to get a lot closer to me to detect it. It doesn't seem to reach as far. So I think it has diminished the problem. It just hasn't altogether solved the problem. Oh, and I do also do oral probiotics as well.
Mm. I was actually going to say my next question was, have you ever tried any fermented uh, beverages like
Yes,
kefir or
yes.
oh,
Not the
okay.
beverages, not the beverages. I don't do the kombuchas and all that stuff unless I make it myself, which I'm learning how to do that. But I have done the fermented sauerkraut, the fermented cabbage, things like that. I don't do the probiotic pills because I don't think those things are effective. I think, and I can't imagine those things sitting on a shelf for forever and still being potent. So when I do internal probiotics, it's usually like I do from actual fermented foods. I still heavily lean towards vegetables and fruits as a main part of my diet. I don't do a lot of meat still. I do meat on occasion. So if I do meat, for example, today, I may not have meat again until Monday or Tuesday. It's not an everyday part of my diet. I also do, I don't, some of my Caribbean people might know of Irish sea moss. That's a sea vegetable that is supposed to be really high in all kinds of minerals and things that your body needs. So I do Irish sea moss. I do mushroom capsules because mushrooms fight candida. So I do mushroom capsules. Turmeric, ginger. I have a cupboard full of different herbs, burdock root. Yeah, and I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Sebi, but again, some of my Caribbean people might have heard of him. He was one of the people who promoted the alkaline diet and stuff like that. So I got a lot of the herbs and stuff that he recommended. So I've been doing a lot of those things. And I don't know, man. They make me feel better, that's for sure. My body feels better than it felt when I was in my 20s. Um,
Mhm.
I don't look my age. I barely have any gray hairs in my head. I'm 40 now. But I don't look my age. People routinely think I'm still in my 20s, and that's a true story. Like people are still, oh, you must be 28, 29. Like no, I'm 40. And I think that I'm attributing that to the way that I eat and the fact that I do try to get enough sleep at night. So I do physically try to take care of myself, hoping that if I do all of these things and I keep my stress level low and I don't eat all kinds of junk food, that it maybe would solve the breath. But unfortunately, not really. I still have bad breath, maybe just not. I want to believe maybe just not as bad as it used to be.
Mm. Well, we're gonna wind down now. So
Okay.
anybody that's in the chat right now, if there's any questions you want to ask John, now's the time to do so. And
And to the
for
to the people in the chat, if I may say to the people in the chat, there's really nothing off limits, man. Whatever, because if you're suffering from this, I know what you're going through. So I just want to try to be helpful while telling my story as real and true to life as it is. So there's really no question that's off limits, man. Whatever you got, just throw it at me, and if I can answer it, I'll answer it.
and also I wanted to ask you, would it be okay for me to drop your email if anybody wanted to contact you?
Absolutely, I'm totally down for that.
Okay. So one of the questions from the comments is, have you ever tried antibiotics?
Um, Antibiotics are interesting to me, because I often attribute the fact that I developed this in the first place to an aggressive couple of rounds of antibiotics that I had right around the time that this whole thing started. And if you
Mm.
read, certain antibiotics actually are known to cause halitosis, whether it's temporary or permanent. There are other antibiotics that I've heard, and I heard Mark McNeely's story where there are certain antibiotics that people say they take it and it seems to make the problem go away while they're on it. But for me, I feel like antibiotics caused this in the first place. That's the only thing that I can think of besides maybe puberty. But when I went to the place in Georgia, in Lawrenceville, she did put me on a 2-week course of antibiotics, and I reluctantly took them because I told her, I said, I don't want to take antibiotics because in all my research, that seems to be something that keeps coming up as a known cause. And she was just like, well, this is a different, different antibiotics are different. So I took those. That's the last time. So we're talking 2015 is the last time I've taken antibiotics for anything. I usually try to avoid them. Even when I had my wisdom teeth pulled and they gave me the antibiotics to prevent any infections, I didn't take those because I was just too, I just didn't want to. I don't like the thought of antibiotics at all.
Another question that I have is, how did the sea moss make you feel when you tried it?
Man, let me tell you, you hear all these health food claims, these different health foods, and oh, they'll make you feel like this, and it'll do this for your hair and this for your skin. Anybody if you haven't tried sea moss, it's a sea vegetable. You soak it in water, then you kind of steep it in warm water, and then you blend it, and it becomes a gel. It's tasteless. You can put it in your smoothies. You can put it in other recipes, and it makes me feel amazing. It's just I buy it in bulk now, because it gives me energy. I really do feel like it cleared up my skin. Not that I had bad skin, but it made my skin better. It just like there are days when that's all I have for breakfast, and I can go all day, never get tired, never feel really all that hungry. Like it really does what it says it does. I can't I don't know about the other claims, like it helps with the cartilage in your body and ligaments and joints and all of that. But I can say it makes me feel great. It does. I like it a lot.
Another question is, have you ever taken an enzyme test?
No, because that's also something that I learned about fairly recently. It was only about a month and a half or so ago that I began researching again. I went all these years where I wasn't reading any articles or anything because I was just coming up against the same articles that I always would find. But about a month and a half ago, and it's gonna sound crazy, but this is a true story. About a month and a half ago is when the girl that I'm really crazy about like started spending time with this other guy. And I guess just in a fit of rage and jealousy and just being fed up and thinking, I want a girl, like I want a wife, I want kids. I'm not going to let this thing get in the way of my next relationship. So in a weird way, it kind of encouraged me to start researching again and trying to find a way to beat this thing so that I don't ever have to experience that kind of heartbreak again. So it's only about a month and a half ago that I learned about SIBO and I learned about these enzyme tests and stuff like that. I'm actually thinking about ordering digestive enzymes to maybe help my body digest food better. Maybe it's my body's just not digesting food the way that it should. Again, I don't have any other symptoms. I never feel bloated. I never feel heartburn. I never feel any of that stuff. But just trying to approach it in every way, I am going to have these different tests run and try these different products again to see if they give me any kind of help.
Another question is, have you been tested for H. pylori?
Yes, and that was negative.
Okay. Another commenter wants to know if you still smoke weed.
Oh no, I gave that up many years ago. And when I gave my life back to the Lord, I gave up the weed. I gave up all the bad habits. All of that stuff is done with. No, I don't smoke the weed anymore.
And I guess the last question right now is, they want to know, what do you work, or what does he do for work now?
I do accounting for one of the major hotels in Miami, but it's cool. It's not that hard because the office where I work, um, it's like there are times where I could be in the office all by myself. Like the office is not always like packed. Our department is a smaller department. The crew is only about 7 of us, and we're not all always there at the same time because since it's a hotel and we're kind of there around the clock, people work in shifts. So there are times when I'm pretty much left alone to just do my thing and I'm not really bothered by anyone. So I just put some music on in my ears and I go to work and I don't really have to talk much. I do while I'm at work, I do try to avoid the elevator. So if I need to go throughout the hotel, I usually take the stairs. If I see people in the hallway that I know, because there are people at my job who like me, they like my personality and stuff. Um, I just, generally say a quick hi to them. We no longer have the mask mandate at my job, but I still choose to wear mine because it makes me feel like there's a barrier. So people think I'm weird. They ask me, why do I still wear my mask if we don't have to anymore? And I just always like, oh, the Rona is still out there, but that's a lie. I wear it because it makes me feel a little safer to do it. But I'm still very quiet. I don't talk unless I absolutely have to. I know I've talked a lot during this interview, but that's because I'm on my phone. In person, I've learned to say a lot with the fewest words possible. So my mouth doesn't have to be open for very long. I've become a master at that.
Mhm.
Um, you know what I'm saying? I'm still more reclusive. Like I said, man, if I'm not at work or at church, I'm usually home. I don't really go anywhere. And that sucks. It really does, because the loneliness is a really hard part of this disease. But so it's like the irony is, where my safety is, that's also where a lot of the pain is too, because I'm always alone. I'm always by myself. And it's hard, because I am naturally an outgoing person. And I am somebody who, before people detect this problem, people like me, not just girls. I mean, people in general, they like having me around. They like my disposition. But when they detect the problem, because you can't hide it forever, eventually when they detect it, their attitudes change, and then I just kind of go back to square one. So I've learned to just kind of be okay with being single and being alone and going to movies by myself, or things like that, because I would rather just avoid being rejected and being laughed at.
All right. And this is one last question. If there's going to be another question that pops up, you should just email him, because this is going to be the last one. So this, well, the commenter asked, do you wear your mask every day? You mentioned about wearing your mask. And do you still get reactions from people because of you wearing it while wearing it?
I do still wear my mask every day. I don't, surprisingly, I don't wear it at church. That's the only place I don't wear it. Um, and that's just because, like, people at the church, like, oh, we believe in the blood of Jesus, nothing can harm me. So I don't wear it at church because I'd be literally the only one wearing it at church. But at work, I'm not the only person. I'm just one of the very few. But yeah, out in public, other places, I do always wear my mask. On the train, at the grocery store, wherever I go, I do still choose to wear my mask. Do people smell my breath? That's a harder question to answer, because even when I wear my mask, I still try not to stand too close to people. And it's still hard for me to look a person in the face when I talk to them. I'm still very self-conscious about that. So it's hard for me to test it. I don't seem to be noticing people, stepping away from me, or sniffling a lot, or spontaneously breaking out in coughing and sneezing when I start talking. So I think the mask at least mitigates it a little bit. Um, but does it stop it entirely? I wouldn't know, because I'm too afraid to get too close to anyone and test it.
Well, John, I appreciate you for coming on. I do want to say that, yeah, a lot of people within the comments really like you. And I want to ask you if there is some people, some person who has identical story or just a very similar story to you having halitosis. What words of wisdom would you like to give that person, or inspiration would you like to tell them? Final thoughts in general.
Amen. Thank you. Yeah, I would like to offer something at the risk of feeling a little bit hypocritical, because like I said, man, I'm telling my story very honestly, and there are days when I am not positive. There are days when I am angry, I am frustrated, I am sad, I am depressed, I cry. um or sometimes I just stare off into space because I'm numb, you know. So I'm not, I want to preface by saying not every day is a good day for me. However, I still do want to encourage anyone who's going through this to keep fighting, to keep finding a reason to live. My reason is my mom. My reason are my little sisters. My reason are the people who depend on me at church. I know that there are people who do love me despite this. So I live in a way for them. Um, because I feel like I'm my parents' legacy, and I wouldn't want that stain on their legacy that their son committed suicide or did something crazy. Um, Keep pressing forward. I know it's hard. Trust me when I say I know it's hard. It's been almost 30 years for me, guys. So I know it's difficult, but keep fighting. Medicine advances every year, every day, probably. I don't know. There's new things. I actually read recently about a new medicated gum that is in trials right now that was developed by actual dentists, and it's said to, at least in the trials, have like a 97% efficacy in fighting the things that cause bad breath. So there's at least that, you know. Keep seeking medical professionals, even if they tell you don't smell bad or whatever. Keep going. At the very least, you owe it to yourself to keep your oral hygiene up. Make sure your gums are good. Make sure your teeth are good. Um, there's no reason to succumb to gingivitis and periodontal disease just because your breath stinks. At least keep your teeth healthy, keep your tongue healthy, you know, things like that. Drink water, lots and lots and lots of water. Um, and just find things that you like. Find things that don't make you feel so subhuman. You know, whatever puts a smile on your face. If that's watching movies, if that's reading, if that's, my thing is photography. I love photography. I love sports, you know, things like that. Or if there's someone you like talking to on the phone, because talking on the phone is easy for me, because I know the person can't smell me. So talking on the phone is easy. If you have someone you really like, someone who still tolerates you and likes you, talk to that person as often you can, even if it's only on the phone, because it'll make you still feel that human connection that we all so desperately, you know, deep down inside really want. So just find something that puts a smile on your face and do that as much as possible. Do not give up. Don't let bad breath win. I know it feels like it's winning every day, but it's never really over until it's over. I know cliche, but it's never really over until it's over. Just keep fighting, please. Keep holding on, and let's hold on for each other. I'm more than, you know, happy to give my email out to anyone who wants to reach out. But let's keep fighting this thing together. It might be one of you guys that you find something that works, and then you email me, and then it might work for me. You never know. So let's just keep fighting this thing together.
Well, I appreciate you, John, for joining. I appreciate everybody live that joined in and commented, and you know, got this live stream very interesting. But this is Friday night interview number 37, and we are out of here. See you guys later.